I'd been alone in my apartment for nearly 2 weeks. My roommate Eric was out of town visiting family in Oregon, and our place felt unnervingly quiet without him. Normally I'm at work all day, but I'd taken a few vacation days to lounge around and watch my favorite series in peace. No big plans, not raveling, just time to myself. It was exactly what I thought I needed. I spent most of those days sprawled on the couch, ordering takeout and binge watching until my eyes got thievy. There's something comforting about having complete freedom over your time, but it also gets eerie. Once the sun sets and I realized there's noon around to talk to the hum of the refrigerator was the only constant sound in an otherwise silent apartment. Sometimes I'd open a window to let in the street noise just so I didn't feel too totally isolated that night. Technically very early morning. Something changed. I was in the middle of rewatching an old true crime series, completely immersed, when the doorbell rang. My heart jumped at the unexpected buzz. It was well past midnight, and nobody ever visited Meth that late. I paused my shows at there in stunned silence for a moment, and then slowly got up to check the peephole through the tinny fish islands. There was noon on the porch. Front porch light was on, so if anyone was there I would have seen at least a shape or shadow, but there was nothing. I stood there pressing my eye against the door, feeling my pulse. Quicken, was it a prank or kids messing around? I told myself it was probably nothing and went back to my couch trying to shake off that sudden rush of adrenaline before I could even settle back into the cushions. The doorbell chimed again, then immediately after 3 hard knocks, like whoever was there wanted my attention badly. I nearly dropped the TV remote. As I jumped, returning to the door, I pressed my eye to the peel again. This time I caught the faintest hint of movements, someone darting out of view. All is all. The edge of what might have been a shoe or a pant leg. Whoever it was, they were hiding off to the side. It felt that creeping unease, that primal fear that builds in your stomach when something's just not right. I considered calling out, but found me throat too dry to form. My head spun with possibilities. Was it a lost stranger neighbor needing help? A burglar trying to lure me outside? My mind raced, but my hands stayed glued to the door after a long moment of breathless waiting. I finally stepped back and turned both the deadbolt and the chain lock, just to be safe. Nothing happened for the next few minutes. My heart was pounding so loud, I half expected it to echo in the living room when no more knocks came. I tried to calm myself down by watching TV again, but my focus was shattered. Every little sound from outside made me jump, the air conditioning kicking on. Made me nearly dropped my phone in fear. Eventually, about an hour or so later, I forced myself to go to bed. I double-checked every window and door before heading to my room. Even though I'd locked everything, I still felt too uneasy. I went to my bedroom, left the lights on, and just lay there. Scrolling through social media, trying to distract myself. The old wooden floor creaked occasionally, and each time, I froze, certain someone was creeping around. But after a while, exhaustion got the better of me. My phone slipped from my hand, and I drifted off to sleep. What happened next is still burned into my memory. Sometime in the night, I woke up to a noise, a soft shuffling like fabric sliding against the floor. My eyes opened slowly. The clock read 3:14. I stayed perfectly still, my mind trying to place that sound. It came from somewhere in my room below me under the bed. I couldn't move my muscles, felt paralyzed by fear. I'd seen enough horror movies to imagine the worst, but I kept trying to convince myself it was just the apartment settling or something scraping against the floor. Yet the shuffling continued closer, heavier than its top. Silence. My heart hammered so violently I could hear blood rushing in my ears for a few torturous seconds. There was nothing but that awful quiet. I wondered if I was hallucinating or half dreaming, but just as I worked up the nerve to shift in bed, I heard the bed frame rattle softly. Something was crawling out from underneath. From the corner of my eye, I saw a shape, a stand-up, a man. The dim glow from the street lamp outside my window cast enough light to outline him. He was tall, wearing dark clothes, and his face turned away from me had just stood right beside my bed, like he was listening to my breathing. I had never felt more terrified. My entire body screamed for him. At a move to scream to do something, but he stayed silent, clinging to the hope that he wouldn't notice I was awake after what felt like an eternity. He backed away, step by step, his movements so naturally slow and deliberate. Here, the doorway of my room, and slipped into the hallway without making a sound. The moment I couldn't see him anymore, I heard my blood thundering in my ears as I up and lunged for my phone, locking the bedroom door in one swift motion. My hands were shaking to dial 911. I managed to whisper to the operator that someone was in my home. They assured me officers were en route. I barricaded myself behind the bed phone, clutched to my chest, eyes glued to the door. Within minutes, though it felt like an eternity, I heard the sirens outside the Glendale Police Department. Arrived fast, which was a small mercy. The officers came in, guns drawn, and I met my bedroom door. My voice was trembling, and I must have looked wild with fear. They did a search of the apartment, checking every corner. Prevent the crawl space in the attic. Nobody was there. They found no sign of forced entry, no broken windows, no damaged locks. I walked them through the entire store. The doorbell ringing to the man coming out from under my bed. They tried to reassure me, saying it might have been an intruder who slipped in earlier when I was distracted, but they had no explanation for how he'd gotten in or out with a trace. They took our report and told me they'd patrol the neighborhood for anything suspicious after they left. I was left standing in my living room in a daze, the overhead lights almost too bright for the darkness. I felt inside by then it was almost dawn. I sat on the couch, door double-locked, watching the sunrise through the window. I was too afraid to close my eyes, wondering if the man was still lurking somewhere, watching from across the street. Waiting, my mind cycled through every possible scenario. Did I forget to lock the door earlier in the day? Did he somehow have a copy of my key? Could he have been hiding there for hours, days, and the days that followed? I couldn't sleep. I kept the lights on around the clock. I checked every inch of apartment regularly, glancing under the bed multiple times a day like some terrified kid. Eric came back soon after, but I never told him the full story in detail, just that someone had tried to break in, and the police came before we'd have into the next story. If you're visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell icon to stay updated with our upcoming scary stories. Your support means the world to us, so please share these stories with your friends and family. Thanks. I recall this incident all too clearly, although it occurred several years ago while I was living in San Marcos, Texas. My name is Peter Caldwell, and I had just settled into a modest stone-story house near the outskirts of town. On the evening in question, I was alone. My roommates had gone out of state to attend a wedding, leaving me to enjoy a rare night of complete solitude. At first, I appreciated the quiet. I spent the early part of the evening some work mails and preparing a quick dinner. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary apart from the occasional hum of distant traffic from the highway around 9. I decided to watch a movie in the living room. The overhead light was dim and the only other glow came from a small lamp near the window. As the film played, I began to feel mildly uneasy. The sense of being watched crept upon me with no clear reason. I occasionally glanced at the window, half expecting to see the reflection of my own nervous expression. Nevertheless, it told myself it was merely my imagination, likely triggered by the eerie movie I had chosen shortly before 10. I paused the film to fetch some water while passing by the large living room window. I glimpsed a figure outside. They were still almost statuesque, positioned beyond the thin curtain that covered the glass. Fear welled up inside me. Before I forced myself to lift the curtain slightly and look more carefully, by the time I did, the figure gone or had moved out of my line of sight. My heart pounded, yet I could not be certain if I had truly seen anyone at all. I spent the next hour trying to calm my nerves. I double-checked the front door, the back door, and every window latch to ensure the house was secure. Slightly foolish, I returned to the living room. I told myself it was probably a neighbor or a passerby. Still, the remainder of my evening was tinted with quiet apprehension. Around midnight, I received the first phone call. The screen on my cell displayed no caller ID, thinking it might be an automated spam call. Ignored it. Minutes later, the phone rang again, the same unidentified number. I answered out of habit, only to be met with silence, followed by breathing, slow, deliberate breathing that met a hold my own breathing anticipation. I asked, "Hello, who is this?" But there was no reply, just more breathing. Feeling unsettled, he ended the call. The phone rang for a third time soon after and tightened with worry. By then my voice was quivering, though it tried to maintain composure when the caller still offered nothing but breathing. I hung up again, shutting off my ringer to give myself some peace. Yet the calls continued, each one more nerve-wracking than the last. Each time I heard that same methodical breathing. Finally, exasperated and fearful, I answered and shouted into the phone, demanding to know who was tormenting me. There was a pause. Then whisper my name, Peter, and a disturbing recital of personal facts: my birth date, my mother's maiden name, and event the make of my car. I felt thought the world had tilted off its axis. These were details only a close friend or relative would know. My voice caught in my throat. I managed to ask in a trembling tone, "Why are you doing this?" But the line clicked and the call ended. My mind spiraled with questions. Had my privacy been violated? Was someone watching the house at that very moment? I felt both furious and terrified, uncertain of whom to trust, desperate for help. I dialed the local police department. An officer arrived within half an hour, and I explained the evening's events as calmly as I could. By that time, the phone had stopped ringing. The officer took my statement and promised to investigate, advising me to keep my phone on and call back immediately if anything else happened the next day. They traced the calls to a suspicious number originating only a few blocks away. That was when my fear intensified. Whoever this person was, they were extremely close to my home, possibly within walking distance. By now, the thought that someone I knew might be behind this was growing in my mind, though it tried to dismiss it as paranoia. When the police finally tracked down the individual, the revelation shook me even more. It was my friend, Aaron, someone I had known since college. He claimed it was all injustice, some twisted prank intended to scare me, but the nature of his knowledge, those details and his lurking presence outside my window felt like more than a mere prank to this day. I cannot decide whether I ever truly knew him, or if he was harboring some deeper, more unsettling intent, although Aaron faced consequences from the authorities' disturbing behavior. The experience left me rattled in a way I find difficult to describe. I remember thinking if someone familiar could violate my trust and sense of security that easily, what else might lurk beneath the facade of everyday life? This happened back in 2016. I was living in a small rental house on the outskirts of Tempe, Arizona. I liked having my own space at any front yard, a narrow driveway, and a mail slot in the front door. Most of my days were spent at the office, and I rarely received packages at home, unless I ordered something online. One afternoon in late September, I came back from work to find a plain brown box on my doorstep. No return address, no markings. I didn't recall buying anything, but I figured someone might have shipped a gift or some promotional item by reflex. I checked for a shipping label, but found only my name handwritten in his loppy scroll and my address inside. I found a small bundle of keys on a metal ring and a single Polaroid photograph, wrapped in bubble wrap. The photograph showed my house from the day before. The angle suggested it was taken from across the street, which gave me jolt of unease. The keys had no identifiable markings, just standard house keys. Maybe a couple of car keys stuck beneath them was a slip of paper, no bigger than a business card, written in the same handwriting as the label. It read, "Deliver 8." I sat on the couch staring at that note. It made little sense. Deliver to man why to my house at 8 that night. I waited near the front window, the package and its contents spread out on the kitchen table behind. When nobody came, I felt a tremor of relief, but also disappointment, like I was missing some critical piece of the puzzle. The next day, I decided to analyze everything carefully. I wondered if the keys fit any of my locks, but they didn't match. I tried them on the front door, the side gate, and even the old padlock on my shed. No luck. I drove around the neighborhood looking for unusual vehicles or people watching from a distance. Nothing stood out. Whatever was going on, it was quiet and deliberate that evening. I sat in my living room, again the same tension building up in my chest. Ticked by, and noon showed up, but I noticed something else. The house behind mine had all its lights off. Thought the owners usually kept the porch light on. Maybe they were out, and it was a coincidence, but it left me feeling strangely exposed. By the third night, I was one judge. I set the note on my coffee table and reread the words, "Deliver at 8." The more I thought about it, the more I suspected the note wasn't directed at me. It could have been instructions for someone else, someone who was supposed to use these keys to get into my house exactly at 8. If that were true, then maybe they expected me to leave it unlocked, or worse, they expected me to be the one handing over access and not formed a mistake. I pictured a stranger arriving later, trying the door, finding it locked, and realizing I wasn't following the plan. There was something deeply unsettling about being a pawn in an arrangement I knew nothing about. I double-checked every lock and window, pushing furniture against the back door, just in case. By 8, he was seated behind the kitchen counter, lights off, phone in hand, ready to dial 911. The minutes passed quietly. At some point, he realized I was hardly breathing, expecting a note to any second, but nothing happened. I reported the incident to a local police station the next morning. They took down the details, but seemed unconvinced there was any real threat. No forced entry, no direct threat. In the note, just an odd scenario that I couldn't explain. An officer did come by to do a quick check, but found nothing suspicious. Days turned into weeks, and the package's significance faded into an uneasy memory. I kept the keys locked in a drawer, unsure what else to do with them. I tried not to obsess over it, but one thought refused to leave my mind. If someone out there had instructions to deliver at 8, maybe they still planned to, maybe they tried and failed, or maybe they were simply waiting for another chance. Whenever I passed that drawer, I couldn't help glancing at it as if expecting to hear someone at my door. The photograph felt like a silent threat, proof that whoever sent it was watching me long before I knew they existed. Over time, I moved on as people do, but even now, I sometimes wake up at night, my heart pounding, convinced I heard a faint knock. That old note still lingers in my thoughts, the words etched into my memory, because no matter how many times I lock my doors or change my routine, I can't help but wonder if I unknowingly held the key to someone else's plan, and maybe, just maybe, they're still waiting for that perfect moment, 8, or otherwise, to finish what they